Let's get a quick take on Denver District Attorney Beth McCann calling for an investigation into the death of former inmate Marvin Booker. McCann will have the grand jury investigate the accusations of evidence tampering and obstruction of justice involved in the 2010 Downtown Denver Detention Center death. Patty Calhoun from Westward. This sounds like big news. I'm not sure if Beth McCann made this officially a campaign promise when she ran for DA, but she did talk about a whole different look at cases like this. Is this a big deal?
It's a very big deal and a surprise, I think, that Beth McCann did it. We have to keep focused on the fact that it's not really the circumstances of the death, but what happened to the evidence afterwards that the grand jury will be looking into. And this is not the first case where there have been accusations of disappearing evidence from the various departments of safety. So I think it'll be the first of maybe a couple investigations.
Mike Krause from the Independence Institute. Does this send a new signal to the Safety Department of Denver?
Well, it depends on what happens with the grand jury, obviously. I mean, this could just be a way to close the books on this very long-running case finally if the grand jury comes up empty and Beth McCann can basically close this file. But yes, if it turns out that they proceed forward with prosecutions based on process and transparency and evidence, I think that's a huge shot across the bow, because that's really where, I mean, look, there's lots of incidents that take place within jails. Let's face it, and the Denver jail has a long history of some fairly significant dysfunction. It's the process afterwards where the public really gets a view of what's actually going on, and that becomes really important. So if it turns out that the grand jury finds wrongdoing within the process and the transparency within the process, then yeah, I think that's a very big deal moving forward, and a strong message.
Eric Sonderman, political analyst. We have often talked around this table about the optics of a situation. What are the optics for the city here? Because you have a DA making a pretty bold claim, but it's talking about how the city has handled its business in this particular arrest.
I think the optics are positive, and at some level, I don't care that much about the optics in this situation. I care about some degree of justice. And kudos to Beth McCann. This would have been easy for her to say, that's past tense, I'll deal with things that arise under my tenure. She chose not to take that course. Good for her. You and I, Dominic, moderated a debate between her and Helen Morgan, her opponent in the general election. They were both fairly far out of point, but particularly Beth McCann on this issue of holding police officers accountable. I think there's a message not only to the sheriffs and the other people who run the jail, but there's a message here to Mitch Morrissey, her predecessor as well, and that message is, excuse the pun, but there's a new sheriff in town.
Indeed. Penfield Tate, attorney with Q-Tech Rock, also a longtime state lawmaker. Penn, you are our esteemed lawyer at the table today. What does all this mean for folks seeing a grand jury investigation, obstruction of justice, a lot of big terms here? What do you think this means?
I think it means several things. For Beth McCann, it shows consistency in action. She was the only candidate who ran who in the past had prosecuted police officers for misconduct. So no one should see this as a big surprise. Beth had done that before. Secondly, everybody's been disturbed about all these massive settlement awards the city of Denver has been paying over the years for incidents that, quite frankly, are indefensible. And now you have a DA who's saying, okay, my predecessor passed on filing criminal charges on the death itself, but the bigger concern is, you know, part of why that decision was made was based on the evidence presented, and now there's credible reason to believe that the evidence was tampered with, and in specific that the sheriff's department concealed information, and essentially they turned in the wrong taser to be evaluated to determine what was wrong and what killed this man. So it is signaling that this is a new day, this is a new time, it's a new deal. She's going to have a different level of accountability for all of the Department of Safety, which the community has been crying out for loudly over the past several years. And I agree with Eric. It doesn't matter what the optics are or how this administration feels about it. This is her job, and I'm glad to see that she's taking it seriously, because I think for decades, most of our DAs just haven't taken seriously officer-involved shootings or safety-involved related deaths. And it's important that this one begin a new wave.